right in a room full of banknote printers and people who think carefully about how to avoid one of the biggest problems in the distribution of money and currency, and that is counterfeiting. So a few words about what I'm here to talk about. This is a very new but interesting topic. I'm sure you read quite a lot about it in the papers these days with talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum and cryptocurrencies and so on and so forth. But I'm really not going to talk about that at all. What I'm here to address is what happens when our fascination with paper currency, which is actually quite a magical instrument, this fascination moves on to the digital world. And I think you all know that our children are quite comfortable with digital transactions, digital communication, digital photographs, Instagramming, digital studies. So we actually set out to answer what I think is a question that needs to be answered, which is, what is currency? How do we use it? And what happens when it becomes digital? Now, 11 years ago, this struck me while I was still very much in the world of accounting and audit and technology. And we asked ourselves a question: is currency ever going to be digital? And if it is digital, what is it? And what came back to us was a very simple prose, that currency itself is nothing more than a legal doctrine. It is an idea embedded in our currency laws, in our foundation of central banks, that says the currency of a nation, sovereign currency of a nation, or a group of nations as the euro might be, is produced by the central bank of the nation. The central bank is the sole producer. It is legal tender once produced. It can be used to execute any transaction within that nation or that region. And then instant settlement is possible when I share this bearer note, or I give this bearer note to somebody with whom I'm executing a transaction. And all of that is beautifully embodied in this instrument today. And it has lots of advantages, which I don't need to tell you about, you understand. But it also has a few disadvantages. I sort of boil it all down to one simple idea. It doesn't traverse space and time, meaning to execute a currency transaction today, I have to be in the same place at the same time as the person I'm transacting with. In the digital world, however, that may not be necessary. We can actually make currency fly. And if we were to do that, how would it work? And how would it continue to embody the idea of currency, the legal doctrine behind currency, which is enabling only the central bank to create this magical instrument, and enabling only the central bank to put it into distribution. Whereas allowing all of us, the public, businesses, commercial banks, merchants, vendors, all transact in this common instrument. And to solve that problem, we set up this company. It initially started off as a research project, and then now has evolved into something that's quite commercially viable, to start engaging with central banks to help them and work with them to address this issue. As I said, I'm quite fascinated with this particular instrument, and I realized that for a digital currency or a digital fiat instrument to exist, we can actually learn from physical currency. Physical currency is a theoretically non-counterfeitable instrument built on a secure substrate with multiple features of security embedded onto that substrate. And of course, we already heard about how the architecture of physical currency allows for newer and newer features to be added to it. So we looked at this very carefully and said, wait a minute, this can actually be done digitally. You can start with a digital substrate, a secure substrate, onto which you can digitally mount security features that essentially become unbreakable and do it in a fashion where only the central bank controls those features, the design of the features, puts it onto this digital instrument, and then puts it into circulation with a high degree of confidence, if not a perfect degree of confidence, that it can be counterfeited. These ideas are not new. These ideas were created actually by this industry that's sitting in this room. But we were able to capture those ideas and turn them into a digital format to enable the same thing, which is to enable the doctrine that a central bank creates fiat currency, puts it into circulation, the public is safe to use it. We realized that to do this, you could not just rely on a single security feature. You had to have multiple security features. In fact, to make a replica in digital form of what is today the most secure piece of paper in the world, and I think I'm holding one of the most secure pieces of paper in the world, required us and would require central banks to create the most secure digital message in the world. And by the way, that won't last forever. Tomorrow, a year from tomorrow, you will have to add more security features, and this thing has to keep evolving because you have to stay a day ahead of the bad guys. So the architecture had to allow for that. And we realized that you cannot do this by just enabling those features in an online server. It doesn't work. You cannot do it by just writing a bunch of clever software. You cannot do it by relying on some new innovation called blockchain. You had to do it by doing it in a secure environment, just like you produce physical currency, in a completely offline format, so that no one else except the central bank has access to how this is done, and then put it into circulation. And it can only be done with the latest of security capabilities in the digital world, bound together on the latest security digital fabric, and it can only be done with hardware. Just like hardware secures physical currency, hardware will also have to secure digital currency. And this, by the way, is now being certified around the world, starting with the latest of security technologies, and will have to continue to be certified and have to continue to evolve to beat the computational powers that are still to come. Once this currency is created, we realize that the currency would have to be put into circulation. And the best and most effective way to put digital fiat currency into circulation is to use existing payment platforms. So the central bank does not have to build the roads, it does not have to build the pipes, it just has to create the secure instrument. It turns out that the roads and the pipes for the distribution of digital fiat already exist. They exist through existing payment systems, they exist through transportation systems, they exist through banking platforms. So it is actually possible for the central bank to create the instrument, but use existing platforms to distribute. And because a euro is a euro is a euro circulating through all of these pipes, it becomes essentially fully interoperable, meaning it is not a private instrument, it is a public instrument created by the central bank. And it can work through all existing payment platforms. So, in essentially bringing this to closure, and I know there's going to be lots of questions around this, what do? We build the security hardware and the security technology and the security management platforms to enable central banks to exert the ultimate control on the creation, the issuance, and distribution of digital currency. It can be distributed through private sector operation, allowing an instrument created by the central bank to circulate in non-central bank systems, commercial bank systems, payment operator systems, transportation authority systems, and so on and so forth. It is an interoperable instrument, meaning it can go across systems. It can be used for retail payments, and it can be used for wholesale payments. It is a bearer instrument that executes instant settlement, meaning if I'm holding it, it's mine. If I give it to you in the form of a payment, and you're holding it, it has settled. It doesn't have to settle back through traditional banking systems all the way back to, let's say, an RTGS. It can settle on a retail level. It's high performance, meaning it has to be able to execute thousands, millions, maybe billion transactions a second, because you're talking about retail payments. It should work as effectively in the retail world as it does in the wholesale bank-to-bank world. And it has to have unsurpassed instrument security, meaning it has to be non-counterfeitable. Lastly, all of this becomes only interesting when you can significantly reduce the cost to the public, to the economy, in the production of a digital instrument. And we believe that you can cut costs of physical currency, which is still quite expensive to produce and transport, by down by a tenth, maybe even down to 1/100th of the cost of physical currency. In fact, if done correctly, as the ability to distribute a digital currency grows and the use of it grows, the essential cost of digital currency should start to approach zero. It may never be exactly zero, but it should start to approach zero. Now, while doing all of this, for purposes of truly understanding how a digital currency is actually working, because you cannot see it, it was important to build real-time trackability of this currency for the benefit of the central bank. So you have the secure issuance, you have the secure distribution, and then you have the secure observance or the governance of the currency. This was a requirement that was placed on us as we started to talk to central banks, so we built an integral platform where all currency instruments in digital form in circulation can actually be added up, and the central bank can have a high degree of confidence that only what they produced and put into circulation is actually in circulation. Because these are secure digital instruments that are sitting in electronic wallets, and the ability to see all of those, and the ability to add it all back up, and to watch the currency transact was a very valuable feature, which unfortunately you cannot do today with physical currency. Once it's in circulation, it's in circulation. You have to sort of rely on commercial banks and others to sort of verify that it is in circulation. In a digital world, it's actually possible to observe these instruments in real time, to watch them move, to see the velocity of M0, and to actually add up all of the values of the individual instruments to know that only what you put into circulation is in circulation. This, by the way, turns out to be a very valuable capability, because this allows the central bank to make decisions about how much M0 liquidity to put out there and how much M0 liquidity to take out, so that almost in real time they can manage the amount of M0 in circulation. So, this has been a long and slow journey for us. The essential inventions and the creation of the IP necessary to do this happened almost 7 years ago. But then we had to actually build in the requirements of central banks, and we had to put it out there to test it. And we began testing this on existing live platforms, and have now started rolling out very slowly, very carefully, very cautiously in several markets. I think Paul mentioned earlier that we have started rolling out in West Africa. Recently, you might have seen an announcement that we are starting to roll out in the Philippines. There's going to be a forthcoming announcement that we are rolling out in another very large Southeast Asian country. These are small deployments where the central bank has authorized the issuance of a digital fiat currency through a commercial entity, a commercial bank. That currency then represents a reserve held at the central bank. and put into circulation. The central bank has full visibility into the currency and its transactions. And the essential use case are all use cases for physical currency, whether that be retail payments, whether that be remittances, whether that be settlement of debt in a wholesale environment, or even making government payments and taking government receipts, whether that be government disbursements to government employees or tax payments back to the government in a digital fiat currency environment. These are being rolled out and tested, and I have to say that the results are looking very good. The use of it is growing. The public's faith in it and trust in it as they use it is starting to increase. And I believe that our children will be just so much more comfortable in a world that's digital. And so we do need to actively think about what happens when physical currency today that we know of becomes digital someday. We also believe that driving the security standards associated with digital requires interchange with international security bodies and international standard setting bodies. To that end, we have contributed much of our work to the ITU. We participate very closely with the International Standards Organization, ISO, ANSI X9, which is the US standards body that works closely with ISO. We're working with the Federal Reserve in the United States. We're also working with several central banks around the world to first gather the specifics of the requirements, then embody that in the technology, and then test it with the central banks in actual commercial deployments. And lastly, the security required for a truly digital currency to work requires that that digital currency can actually be held in a physical digital instrument, like your mobile phone. The standards to do that and the security to do that have not been developed yet. However, an organization called Global Platform, which helps set certain standards for what happens in a mobile phone to execute offline transactions using a mobile phone, is called Global Standards. And we have been contributing to them in such a way that future mobile phones will have the hardware security element necessary for a central bank issued digital currency to work in an offline environment on your mobile phone. Meaning, just like I hold currency in my physical wallet today, I'll be able to hold a digital fiat currency in my mobile wallet tomorrow. So that's the work we're doing. I look forward to an opportunity to continue this dialogue. I understand that we will have a longer session, Paul, this afternoon, during which I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. I hope that was interesting for you.
Thank you very much. In fact, our separate immersion session will be this morning rather than this afternoon. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, people who've managed to stick very well to the timetable. We've got 10 minutes set aside for Q&A. I'm sure that's, that if you have questions which you cannot get across during that Q&A session, there will be other opportunities to do it privately. Some very valuable and quite different presentations. So can I now invite people to pose questions? Yeah, Mark.
Hi, thank you. Mark Deeks from Currency News. Question for Jonathan. Really interesting presentation. A couple of things spring from that is, what about people who are unbanked in the world, who don't have access to mobile phones, don't have bank accounts? How does this new platform work for them? I can see the advantages for the central bank in terms of lowering cost, and you can see the live, as you were saying, the kind of volumes moving and things like that, which all sounds marvellous. So the unbanked. Secondly, what happens when there's a power outage or there is an issue with your mobile phone? You know, quite frequently in the UK, it's almost monthly that we